Well, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to The View from Abroad, the latest in our series of forums for hospitality, presented by the Melbourne Food and Wine Festival. My name is Anthea Loucas Bosha. I am the CEO of Food and Wine Victoria, and I will be your host today. Thank you for joining us. A very big thank you to our partners at the Bank of Melbourne and Visit Victoria for their ongoing support of the festival and in turn for hospitality. Today, it's my pleasure to be moderating this conversation, which takes in international experiences relating to COVID-19. As of today, we have seen some, or as of the last little while, we have seen some restrictions easing around regional Victoria, but Melburnians are still waiting to hear what our roadmap out of lockdown looks like. And the Premier has flagged that he will be making this announcement on Sunday. So as we look to reopen and recover and rebuild, what are the learnings that we can take from global perspectives as they navigate global communities as they navigate their way easing out of COVID-19 restrictions? What's the mood abroad? How are consumers feeling about dining in restaurants? And how can we best prepare ourselves for when we're ready to reopen the doors to our beloved restaurants, cafes, and restaurants? And we can't wait, absolutely. So today we're joined by three chef-restaurateurs from around the world. Thank you all for being here today. Robert Marchetti, welcome. Good evening to you in New York. Thank you very much, former Melburnian. Lovely to have you back in the state for a brief period, if we can say so. Rob, thank you. Rob, of course, is the co-owner of Gran Tivoli and Peppi's Cellar in Loucas, New York. Thanks again, Rob. We're joined by May Chow, is joining us from Hong Kong. May, thank you so much for being here. May is, of course, the chef co-owner of Bao and Happy Paradise. And from Auckland, we have Josh Emett joining us on a very exciting day because Josh is opening a restaurant today, which is incredibly positive news for us to be hearing out of Melbourne when we're still waiting for our restaurants to open. Josh, of course, is opening Onslow restaurant today, and he's also the co-owner of Rātā, the Oyster Inn, and the go-to collection of restaurants around New Zealand. Josh, thank you for being here, especially because it's a very busy day for you and an exciting one as well.
No, thank you for having me. It's a really exciting day, definitely.
we can't wait to hear more about the new restaurant. We'll get to that a little bit later on. So I thought perhaps we might zoom over to New York first, Robert.
Sure.
So you opened Gran Tivoli with your good mate Jason Scott, a fellow Sydney-sider, who our audience may know from Baxter Inn and Shady Pines. And you opened Gran Tivoli, Nolita and Peppi's Cellar 14 months ago. And just as you were feeling, some great success, you were gaining momentum, COVID-19 hit. What has the last 6 months looked like for you?
Well, now when we had COVID lockdown, it's 20 months old, but we won't count the time that we were shut. So we didn't age that much. Look, the lockdown's been extraordinary. New York has had some of the most strict governance in the world. And where some of the people here were very quick to act, from the governor to the mayor. We had millions of people come in from Europe, which is where the infection rate doubled. And the reason New York took such a hammering is we had people direct from Europe straight into Newark and JFK. But the feeling during the period, even though from people from the other side of the world probably thought pandemic and chaos, it wasn't. It was very organized, but it was really sad. I mean, we were watching refrigerated trucks pull up to hospitals near our homes because they couldn't get enough bodies in the morgue. They didn't have enough space in the morgues with bodies. And to see that was really eye-opening, not just to read it in the paper and see it on CNN, when CNN's actually outside your home. That was pretty eye-opening, and that was probably a deafening moment for New York.
So a very confronting time, obviously.
Sure.
What have you been, where are you at in terms of your restaurant, and have you opened? What does the business look like at the moment?
Right. So we actually, ironically, like you're right, the 3 months prior to shutting, we're having our record months. We had a very quiet entry into New York on purpose because we really wanted to understand the groundwork. I've been living in the US for many years now anyway, and New York for about 3. Right now, everybody's taking it very carefully. The people that have access to outdoor dining have had some outdoor dining, not everyone. Depending on your location, it's not necessarily your size because some people have very small shop fronts. So my restaurant, for example, we have 120 seats upstairs. We have a 200 capacity bar downstairs. But we could only get 2 tables of 2 outside because we are on a corner. We have a handicap ramp and all that kind of stuff on the side. So we had no access to outdoor dining whatsoever. And some of my friends actually opened during the pandemic, ironically chose to and have done incredibly well. And other friends have tried and they haven't. So it's a real mixed bag. I honestly, hand on heart, can't say there's a science. The weather's been horrendous because it's unpredictable. So summer we had days where it was windy and rainy. So the outdoor people were trying to figure out how to weatherproof their place. And only today, changing seasons, it's actually raining and cold. And so outdoors kind of in trouble. And we are now in a position where we're 25% indoor dining. Parts of Astoria and Queens and Brooklyn, which are outside Manhattan, have spiked. And there's a new lockdown in process. And the governor's threatened businesses if they don't comply. Well, when I say businesses, people, if the infectious rate goes up, they'll put Manhattan into a lockdown. So, look, Jason and I made a pretty gallant effort with the shutdown. We basically paid all our team out as everything in our bank account, to be really honest. And actually, we didn't know what was going to happen. So we actually paid everybody, we cashed everybody's checks and paid them in cash just because we didn't know if they were going to make a run on the banks. And it sounds very dramatic now, but not when you're sitting in the middle of a pandemic and banks are shutting and no one can get their checks cashed and so forth. And then since then, at least 25% of our staff have relocated back to their homes. So a lot of them outside New York. Our Australian contingent of people, because we had like 14 Australians working for us, half of them sponsored, we found work for them everywhere. So we've had friends hire them and we've relocated them in places. And some of them are in standby. Some of them are lucky enough to wait in other countries for us. And then the remainder of staff we've helped find work. So some of the people it's been really tough. We count ourselves lucky because we can pay our rent and eat, but some of our staff, really they couldn't pay their rent. The governor actually put a mandate in no one could be evicted and no one could have their energy cut off. That is going to be extended because right now they're looking at 100,000 people in New York State. They'll have their energy cut off by Monday if it's not extended because they can't pay their bills. So, 600,000 hospitality workers in New York. We decided that we can't open with 25% indoors because it gives us, I think we worked out around, because of the way the restrictions are, it's not 25% as well. It's 6 feet apart from table to table. Right. And half my restaurant is booths right next to each other. And also I have a bar, which is half the dining room to eat at. And you're allowed to eat at a bar.
Right.
So that's kind of crazy for us. And we made a decision that we don't want to open because we're worried that what will happen is to turn the lights on and get everything running will cost us probably in the vicinity of 100,000 just to open. And we think there might be another shutdown coming. So we're holding tight, working with our landlord as well, and waiting for the increase in indoor dining to come back.
Right. And do you have a threshold of when you think, okay, yeah, we can make this viable now, we can open?
Really it's monitoring it day to day. Today we wake up every day and listen to the mayor and the governor have their morning briefings and watch the spike. The biggest worry we have right now, and this is kind of nutty as restaurateurs, everybody else will get this. I can jump on a plane and fly for 7 hours or 10 hours across the country, sit next to you with a mask on and breathe in recycled air, but you can't sit next to me in my restaurant 3 feet apart. So we're getting punished, sure the airlines are getting punished as well, but restaurants are getting punished quite substantially. And do I think it's right or wrong? It's subjective. No one should die, but we're worried because winter's coming and it's spiking again. And because we have a very conservative leadership that's done a great job so far. Some people think they haven't, but look, I'm not in the director's chair making life and death decisions. I also don't want to bring my staff back and put them in harm's way. I took the train this morning uptown and I was the only person in 3 cars. When you think about that, there's 35 million people a day traveling on the train. People are so scared that, some people are and some aren't, that the increase of traffic is 30% higher because no one wants to catch a train, they want to drive.
Right.
So right now, our mandate is to basically wait and see, watch the increase, and then wait for the shutdown to happen, possibly because winter's coming and everybody's going to be in close quarters. Outdoor dining is going to end in a minute. We've got these draconian laws here, like in Australia and in Asia we call them LPG gas bottles, which doesn't sound like a thing. We had to get a legislation passed just to use them on the sidewalk because they're never allowed in the city. People are trying to figure out how to sit outside. Now, Melbourneites don't care because I'm a Melbourne boy. We'd sit outside, but when it starts snowing, it's getting a little tough to sit outside.
Yeah. Okay.
That's where we stand.
Yeah. So wait and see approach and still very uncertain times.
Sure.
On the bigger picture in New York, I think a really relevant point for us to touch on is that the outdoor dining piece, because the Premier has flagged, while we're waiting for the announcement on Sunday, one of the easing of restriction measures that has been flagged is potentially that we will see outdoor dining, exclusively outdoor dining put in place. And this has very much been modelled on the New York Open Restaurants Initiative, which was run across the city, and it's sort of been credited with keeping 9,500 restaurants in business during COVID. We're hearing mixed reports on the success of that. And obviously with you going into winter, but we're we're in spring coming into summer. Very interested to hear your perspective on how successful that has been. There have been winners and there have been losers. We'd love to hear more about your personal experience of that.
Well, look, I've started a show which I haven't launched yet, the Raw Hospitality Show, and I'm plugging that. But I interviewed Chris Loucas from Chin Chin Restaurant Group in Melbourne this morning, and another friend of mine, Rick Barnaby from Mollo Wine Bar in Sydney. And the reason I interviewed both those guys, and there's a story here for the outdoor dining. The reason I interviewed those guys is they're both ex-finance that jumped into hospitality and left, and they were both living in New York. And I put Rick on there because Rick has lost half his office in the 9/11 tower, and he decided to throw everything away and come to hospitality. Didn't come back to the site till 2 years ago when he visited me. And so I asked him, and he's like, Sydney's great, business is up. I've got a boat now. We're going to send people on a boat. We're going to, Woolloomooloo Wharf, sunny. And then I flipped over to Chris, and it went really dark. And I can't tell you the amount of explicit that he said on camera. That's called the Raw Hospitality Show, so I let him swear. Yeah. But I mean, the producers that were reading the text and watching the show this morning were horrified, because now we kind of sat there and went, outside North Korea, we can't think of anywhere in the world that has the restrictions that Victoria has. Right. And it's kind of insane, because there's no science behind the idea that behind plexiglass or perspex, as you call it in Australia, sitting outside, you can be contaminated. There's no science behind that. And when Chris told me the numbers, the American producers of mine went, did he mean 10%? And I went, no, he meant 10 people. And they went, no. I mean, and so if you think about the dichotomy there of everybody watches America, and yes, our political situation here is completely nuts. It's like, watching the goodies. But if the Americans were told to be locked in their doors for 22 hours a day and you couldn't go 5 kilometres without ID and you'd be charged, it would be, the militia would run the street. I mean, they're pretty tolerant in New York, but I can tell you, I've got a small hotel and restaurant in Arizona. People will be armed to the teeth to do that. So the answer to that is outdoor dining has been completely a wash your face process. People have done it just to keep the revenue turning. Nobody that I've met has made money. One or two people, a friend of ours, Jason, helped a friend of ours, an Australian Brisbane boy, open Strange Ways in Brooklyn, and he had 80% of his business was outdoors, and he opened to a bang, and that's 5 weeks ago. But big restaurant groups that are sitting on the corner, you've got 120 seats. Everybody thinks corporations were the ones that were going to fight first to open, and the ones that were going to be in charge of who was going to open and close. But the private capital venture run restaurants, like the big format restaurants, they'd shut because they're run by boards. The people that are owner operators like me that could do outside have, but there's not a single person that I've met that said they've made money. Everybody's doing it as an act of service, and in a minute it's going to go away. So you know, I don't know how Victoria sees, and I don't have my opinions about the political side, but I don't know how Victoria uses New York as a benchmark when New York actually isn't doing what Victoria is. And we only did that real lock-in for 2 weeks. And it wasn't like that. It wasn't like check your ID, you can't go 5 kilometres, because I don't think you could do that here. Possibly. So, look, I think, you know, Victoria has to get its outdoor dining going. Chris Loucas gave me statistics today that said 40% of the restaurants in Victoria, even if you open tomorrow, will not reopen. And the numbers coming in from the data online we had last week from the town hall meeting that we had, they're looking at Manhattan alone, 60% of the restaurants won't return. Now, if you think about 600,000 people, and you think that just in New York State and hospitality, you got 10 million in US and 50 million worldwide. And I think Chris put a number out there, it was huge. It was a couple of 100,000, like 400,000 in Victoria, which proportionately, considering I'm in New York and you're in Victoria, that's a lot. So, you know, your guess is as good as mine, but if you don't get outdoor dining back soon, I think you're in real trouble.
Okay. And the takeout on the outdoor dining, some people have had success in that they're busy, but everyone is doing it to survive, is doing it to keep their staff engaged, and because they have the space potentially as well. And there's this kind of evil landlord, you know, don't charge me rent. But the reality is that some of them may be rich landlords, agree, but some of them, like I'm a landlord to a restaurant, and I hadn't charged him. He owed me rent from, I won't say where, but he owed me rent from like January, February, and we made a decision, my partners, that we weren't going to charge him at all, and he was shocked. And I'm like, how can I charge a restaurant rent that's not open? It's really easy to find landlords. It's really hard to find capable people who are paying the rent and having a great restaurant. And so we made that decision. My landlord didn't do that. My landlord came to us and said, can you pay full rent? And I said, of course not. We're not open. Now, we've negotiated some back and forth, and it's been like that. He's got a really big mortgage. He's a really nice guy, but I don't know if he necessarily can afford it. So there's a mixed bag there. When you say busy, you know, some of these restaurants are 180, 200 seats inside, and now I've got 35, 40 seats. I have a friend who's a French bistro, a famous French bistro here, and she only has 40 seats inside, but right now she's got 120 outside. So she's actually been turning over more money, but she said in a minute it's going to get cold and I'm back to what? 25%, 40, you know, inside, and then it's going to go the other way. And then she's in a position now where she has to lay staff off. So it's a really weird situation. Plus, I don't know if you heard of the PPP money that they gave to hospitality members. They launched it too quickly with no idea about where the money should go. So restaurants, people listening, received the PPP money, and it was stringed to this idea that 75% of it has to go to payroll and the remainder has to go to utilities, some of it in rent. And that sounds really great, but the problem was you had to use it and start operating straight away. And if you didn't use it by 2 months ago, you'd have to pay it back. Now, no one was open 2 months ago. So this got passed in Washington, and we're all like, but you've made us lock down, how are we going to open? So the reality is, you know, for Victoria, they shouldn't be looking at New York as restrictive like they are. They need to get restaurants open there straight away. Okay.
10 cases is a joke. I mean, London, my friends are sitting in London the other day having dinner. There's 15,000 cases a day there. And it's kind of nuts.
Very different. Very different. And May, things are very different in Hong Kong. You know, Hong Kong, one of the world's most dynamic dining cities, and you're open. Can you share with us about your experience of what your situation is at the moment?
Well, actually, you know, Hong Kong has, similar to New York, it's a very high density city. So we have about 7 million in population, but we actually never shut down. We had never had a lockdown. So we've been operating, but I think measures started to come in around early March when COVID started to affect Hong Kong. And so we had 4 people limit seatings, 1.5 meter separation, 50% capacity. We just passed our 3rd wave. So the 3rd wave was in early July. And so during July, but our peak to us relatively is when it goes into 60 to 3 digits. So once it hits 100, it's quite high alert for Hong Kong. But as an experience, because we didn't experience lockdown, my personal experience was that if there was a peak and it reaches 60 to 100 per day, that situation would lead to people not wanting to go out. So it would directly relate to the takeaway and the in-house dining.
Yeah.
Now at this point, I think people are quite comfortable because we've kind of locked down the city. Of course, we only have local customers. Hong Kong used to have, I would say, 30 to 40% of my sales used to be based on tourists, expats, traveling people.
Yeah.
Now it's basically on local, but luckily local people really love to dine. So it's people have seen their businesses recover, I would say up to 60 to 70% on average. So we're relatively grateful that we can still operate in a sense. Yeah.
Yeah. And you have Little Bao open, and you're planning to open Happy Paradise, which is more of a fine dining offer. What are the restrictions at Little Bao? How many people can you fit in? What are the density, capacities, etc.?
So we're at 50%, 1.5 meter, but we also have these like plexiglass dividers thing. So as long as you have the plexiglass dividers, then you don't have to follow the 1.5 meter rule. So I think generally because Hong Kong, we went through SARS. So this understanding of wearing masks, sanitization, taking temperature when they enter the door, and to even when you're dining in, there was a while where it was so strict that people would come check, like the police would come check if there was 1.5 meter separation. And there was a requirement that if you weren't eating nor drinking, you had to put your face mask back on.
Right.
So and because of those situations and when people travel, I think 100% people wear masks every day. So when at that point, when you only have like 60 to 100, people are quite like just at this point, it's more like awareness. If you're older, if you have family members that are old at home, then you won't go out as much. Versus, you know, if you're 40, 30, then people feel more comfortable to go out on a regular basis.
Yeah. And for the most part, you've said, particularly with Little Bao, your diners are comfortable to come into the restaurant and...
Well, you can really see now because it's also summertime. Like I think people are, because our recovery rate, like we have, I think only, our numbers are really, really low for such a high dense city. Like we're talking about, you know, on average, we have there was 21 days where there was 0 cases in Hong Kong. And then the third wave hit. And what happened was that it was very interesting because there was 16 different districts that had local cases. And because we were no longer letting people into the city, it was very curious why these things were recurring. And so that's when the third wave shutdown came along, and suddenly it spiked a few days into 100, from 0 to 100.
Yeah.
So, but generally now it's back to, it's relatively, everyone's quite, once it peaks, everyone becomes a bit more contained again, and then it goes lower again. So I think in that sense, you can see families coming out with children. You don't see, you know, like families coming out for dinner. So you really see, not necessarily just before it was like, because expats are not as scared, so they come out more. Or locals go out less. So you see a mixed bag of people coming out. But now it's like everyone feels generally quite safe.
Right. And we were chatting earlier, and you were saying that you have had some very sudden closures where you'd have to close the restaurant overnight, and that's happened quite a few times. As a business operator, how do you manage that? How do you manage the cost piece attached to that? How do you?
It's like we definitely lucky because Little Bao is a mid-range pricing. So the dinner cost is about $30 to $40 US, say for example, $40 US average. So we're able to really translate well into a delivery system. So we set up the platform in around February, March. And to be honest, by June, it wasn't great. But by the time our delivery system became more evolved and more, I guess, professional and all that stuff, you can really see fluctuations. So if it spikes in one way, dine-in lowers, and then the delivery will pick up. But also we have to, because of our location in a CBD area, because once it goes into a more shutdown, not lockdown mode, but a higher risk mode, also there are more people working from home. So our lunch sales would immediately drop. So in essence, we had to talk to our staff. Like we're basically on a very, very flexible situation with our staff where we come to agreement that they'll rather work 70% of the time than say have no work at all. So if the government announces in the morning that we're shutting down, even if we schedule staff for that day, we might literally be like, hey, maybe we schedule 6 staff, maybe 2 staff will end up closing and 4 staff will immediately not come to work. And you just have to be that nimble or else your numbers would never work because at this point we're at 3rd wave, it'll be 4th wave, 5th wave, and now it's just a matter of reaction and how fast your reaction is in terms of your labor costs, food costs, and immediately going to discussion with the landlord. So I've been relatively lucky where the landlords are, and I cannot speak for all landlords because there have been very, very harsh landlords that give no concession. Our concessions are based on the sales, and we reflect and say if we dropped in 50% in business that month because we had to shut down 8 days and have no business after 6 p.m., we would ask for the landlord for concession. And it would be a constant negotiation, right? Because we would have to fight for it. But it's just now like kind of part of my job. Like, oh, this oh, we just lost 50% sale. Like, what do we do now? So we look at other channels to make it work.
And then you would see the delivery service sort of spiking up, and it wouldn't cover the revenue that you would get in the restaurant. But I think you were saying it sort of about 30 or 40% of what you might be earning in the restaurant.
Revenue would be 30, 40%. But it's really, at this point, like they said, it's not about making money. It's just, if I break therein, I win. You know, like if I don't bleed money. So it's like, I have no money to bleed. Like there's no one has cash flow. So it's like the more we can save and not spend. And I don't want to take loans because the government provided like these, you know, interest-free loans, but who wants to take a loan when you're just putting it back into a pool that does not have any return? So we're at a point where we're like, we don't want to spend anymore. And we're going to try to make sure that everyone has, you know, work in the sense that even if it's 70%, it's better than 0.
Yeah. Okay. Well, it feels like treading water is a bit of a theme. And Josh, you talked about this as well in the period when you were in lockdown, but you're in a very different situation now with New Zealand very much opening up and you're at stage 1. How did you manage that period of uncertainty when you were first locked down and then emerging from the restrictions?
Well, with first lockdown, we sort of sat down here in New Zealand and watched what was happening in the world, and we still had we didn't get any cases until there was all hell was breaking loose everywhere else. You know, and probably Italy particularly was being badly hit there. And you know, we got to the point where I think it was a week before we locked down, and there was a mounting pressure on the government to lock down, close the borders. We could see what was going on. And we got to the point actually where a week before the government actually did lock down, we were ready to lock down. You know, it wasn't feeling comfortable. You know, the general perception out there in the public was a little bit uneasy. We were still busy. We had just taken over the Oyster Inn at that point and had been doing, you know, full lunch and dinner for 5 weeks. So when we actually locked down, it was probably more relief than anything else. We were waiting for the government announcement. It happened. We shut down. You know, we were already trying to tighten up our food orders. But you know, that was probably more a, you know, just an emotional roller coaster of uncertainty, really not knowing what even the pandemic meant at that point. And then the lockdown was, I think it ended up being 7 weeks. And the first 4 weeks were, you know, extremely strict level 4 lockdown, which, you know, New Zealanders very much just retreated into their homes and nothing really happened apart from essential services. And I think we really needed to do that because we didn't have definitely didn't have the infrastructure to deal with an influx in hospitals and be able to manage that sort of thing. And actually hospitals, from all reports, were reasonably empty during that period because they were just sort of sitting and waiting. So it was managed as best we could. You know, the government provided subsidy through that period. And then we can't operate in level 4 or level 3 unless you're doing takeaways or delivery, that sort of thing, but albeit with lots of little restrictions. We really waited till level 2 before we could open again. My restaurant in Waiheke has 3 rooms, so my family and I moved there on level 3. We painted, decorated, cleaned, scrubbed, for 3.5 weeks, and actually tested dishes and got ready to sort of for opening again. So when we came out of lockdown and back into level 2, people came out with a huge amount of energy, thirsty and hungry. I would
and
put
when
it.
was that, Josh? When was stage 2 for you?
That was early May, I think. By the time 7 weeks. And it seems like such a long time ago. I mean, we were sort of sitting there freaking out. Major concerns about we're coming into winter as well. And I'm sitting here today thinking, where did the year go? And we were about the sun shining outside, and we're about to hit summer again. So our winter is all but over. And so we had the initial 7-week lockdown, and then we went into, I think we operated for 5 weeks, 6 weeks again before we got the surprise lockdown, which was the last 2-week lockdown.
Right. Okay.
Which we didn't go to level 4, but we did go to level 3, and we can't operate. The majority of my businesses won't operate on level 3. They don't do strong enough takeaway.
Yeah. And then as the restrictions started easing, you saw this immediate appetite for diners to get back into restaurants. There was confidence and people wanted to get back out there, and they are back out there.
A massive, confidence. There's still people that they might take a week and sit tight for a little bit longer. But on the whole, when the bars could fill up, the bars filled up, the restaurants filled up, albeit with restrictions, meter between tables, all guests seated, especially at level 2, sanitizing stations everywhere, upgraded, really strict cleaning policies and sanitizing policies and everything like that. But a lot of positivity, and I think it shows that people, we're a bit lucky in New Zealand because we're an island nation, we're in the bottom of the world, we can lock our borders and close down our borders, still there is a really big appetite. I feel we are reasonably positive down here, and providing we, don't get me wrong, hospitality cannot survive these lockdowns. It is absolutely hopeless. If our staff are subsidised, and the same as May and Robert have said, we can negotiate with landlords and try and operate at the zero cost base. But it's the staff and then holding on to staff. And I suppose the issues that we're facing right now is, a lot of operational issues, just getting enough staff, and having, we've got no transient travellers. We've got no people coming into New Zealand apart from locals. We've got really lengthy visa applications, so they've stretched out for a change of job from a 2-week period to a 7-week period, and various things like that. So it's become very complex, albeit there's huge positivity. Yeah,
and huge positivity. And you were saying, I'm so positive that you're planning to open a restaurant tonight. A project that you've been working on with your wife Helen for 18 months, I believe, in the making, and also there are several other big restaurant openings happening in the city over the next sort of little while, with Ben Bailey and Michael Meredith and Saxon and Parole opening as well. Tell us about Onslow, the restaurant that you're opening tonight.
Well, I've been looking for a site in Auckland for a restaurant, for another restaurant for a long time, and this style of restaurant. It's my wife and I were supposed to open pre-Christmas, building delays that got pushed until February. once February hit, COVID hit. So, you know, we were gone again for 3 months and the building delays again. It got pushed into, you know, probably late July, we were thinking it may be okay to open. And by the end of August, we were handed over the building, you know. So it's just, it's sort of slowly unfolding in front of you, right? And you're trying to make the best decisions as you go along.
Right.
We then decided that we would perhaps look towards end of September to open. Then we went into another lockdown, so we pushed that out to middle of October, and we've been really trying to time it to being in level 1. And we went in level 1 what's today? 4 or 5 days ago, I think. We went to level 1. So we've got the timing right, we're positive, everybody's out and eating, things are good. We've got a canapé party for, you know, a couple of 100 people tonight. I've got, you know, 60, 70 booked for lunch tomorrow, which we've capped, and I've got 110 booked for dinner tomorrow night, Friday night, Saturday night, which we've capped those nights as well, because, you know, we want to make sure we get it right. So there's huge appetite, and I don't, you know, we just have to keep going. I mean, I've got 2 or 3 key staff members on board that I've had on board since pre-Christmas last year. That have, you know, I've been able to put in other businesses, or, you know, we've carried them through for a long year. And you know, we just need to keep going, right? We can't. We either make a decision to just close the doors and take the site on and close the doors and mothball it for 6 months and hope that in 6 months it's better. But when we come out of lockdowns and we go back to level 1 or level 2, we can operate generally really well. You know, so you know, our decision, it's best to soldier on. So we do have a lot of positivity in New Zealand, but very wary that another lockdown could come at some point.
Well, congratulations, and we wish you every success tonight and this week. In the planning, and particularly when COVID hit, did it change your thinking around what the restaurant would look like when you opened, compared to when you first started conceiving what the restaurant would look like, what the offer would be?
No, we've stuck pretty much exactly to what we were going to do. You know, it was never going to be a restaurant that would be able to really do takeaway food. I mean, we could possibly use our kitchen as a production kitchen and do pre-packaged food, whether it's, you know, things like lasagnas or shepherd's pies, and try and make some money off that sort of thing. But we all know that that's probably you know, keeping the staff happy and treading water. That's not ideal. There isn't a backup solution for that style of restaurant that doesn't do food that travels well. You know, we had a residence, we've got 90 luxury apartments above us, and had a residence meeting the other night, and I sort of said to them, listen, if we're in another lockdown, we are one big bubble. We're relying on you. You're not leaving the building, and you're not ordering any food from anywhere else, and we'll cook for you.
You have a bit of a safety net.
How else do you survive? But the restaurant was set up to be a certain standard, a certain way, and you have to stick to that. Otherwise, you'll turn it into something it's not, and that would be a horrible shame.
And how would you describe the restaurant? What kind of restaurant is Onslow? What do you?
Not fine dining. It's sophisticated, timeless, classic. A lot of you know, based on a lot of my time in England, probably more than anything. You know, we've got a gorgeous salmon trolley. We've got a really lovely style of service, very warm, very homely, sort of food that I absolutely love to eat. Which is quite simplistic, actually, and, you know, full of energy. So quite classic in terms of the style of a restaurant, and going probably against, you know, I've got fast casual restaurants as well, but going a little bit against that and a bit more experience driven, because I still believe that people, and this is part of the wider conversation, right, that I don't have a long-term worry about restaurants as a whole, you know, or that, you know, that chefs aren't going to exist, or that, you know, we're going to have to, someday we're going to return to normal. We may or may not survive the next few years in terms of, you know, business. There's going to be a lot of casualties, which is extremely tough on our industry. You know, there is a massive appetite when you see people come out of lockdown. They want to socialize. Restaurants are the fabric of society. It's where people meet, enjoy themselves, relax, eat, drink, and I just can't see that changing.
Wow, I feel so nostalgic for restaurants hearing you speak about it.
It's a bit like that, but they're not. I can sit here and say they're not bloody going anywhere, because that's not what we're seeing here. And you know, but with God, we're going to have to, you know, we're going to have to fight our way through this, right? And it is really difficult, but you just got to, you know, chin up, stay positive, and keep going. Yeah,
that's wonderful, and thank you. And Rob, as you touched on earlier, indoor dining has opened in New York at 25% capacity. How are you seeing the demand and the consumer confidence for indoor dining in New York?
That's a good question. Before I say that, I want to say to Josh, congratulations on tonight. You're the calmest looking dude I've ever. I don't know what you ate this morning. You look like you're about to just have a lay down, and you're about to. I don't even know if I'd agree.
I've got 200 people turning up in an hour 45. So
amazing.
Anthea will just talk really good. How am I seeing the reaction to indoor dining is the question, right? So I went to my friend's restaurant on the first night of indoor dining, and it was empty, and it was a beautiful night. And then I went to another friend's restaurant the second night to show support and went inside, and that was empty. And the rain is starting to bring people inside, and the change in weather. But there's a combination of, actually today I was up Upper West Side, and I went to grab a bite with Jason, and when there was 2 tables outside, and the people, we were trying to get the table, and the people that were sitting on the next table were probably in their 80s, and they looked really shocked that we wanted to sit down, even though it was all social distance. They looked scared. So we actually left. Or not because we felt bad for them, so we actually left. So the answer is, it sucks if you're old and frail and got an ailment. You know, my parents aren't around anymore, so I would be worried if they were. COVID's real. I have a few idiot people that I've met that don't think it's real, but it's real. But like, look, indoor dining's got to come back. Somebody's going to have to sign that waiver that just understands the risk component. But there's more people now going to be in, you know, trauma and issues coming out of this lock-in, which most people just look at the businesses, but businesses are people, unless you're building air and you got a cloud business. But reality, like people like Chris's business with 1,000 staff, I mean, these are human beings that are sitting at home in lock-in. So, you know, New York is people talk about New York tough because there's this kind of New York, which I agree. There's a lot of shit, if I'm allowed to swear, a lot of shit goes down here in New York, you know, 9/11, Hurricane Sandy, the global, and they talk about New York tough, but actually, you know, listening to the boys this morning, talking on the show, I would say hospitality tough, because just listening to May now, how many people do you know in business turn around and go, well, if we break even, it's a good day? Like, only hospitality people say that. You know, my tech friends or my VC friends don't say that. They don't go, well, we're going to invest in this, and if we don't make money, well, we'll just, you know, we'll be fine. Restaurateurs are like happy if we turn a profit at the moment, right? I don't even think that's on the cards for the next year. I think there's a lot of scared people about dining inside, because it's not just if you're old and frail, it's if you pass it on to someone that's old and frail. And you know, I've had a lot of friends that have got COVID that are like in their 30s.
Yeah, so there's still some trepidation that you're seeing in New York.
Yeah, there will be. But when people get hungry and it starts snowing outside, human beings are human beings, right?
Yeah, right. They need to eat.
That stuff.
Yeah.
You know, after 9/11, we all thought we'd stay home and extend our gazebos and never fly again. And then a few years later, what are we doing?
Yeah, yeah. Look, thank you. And the three of you are such extraordinary professionals, and you've all had such different experiences in your respective countries. We're running out of time. We have so many more questions that I'd love to be touching on, but I think it would be really important at this point to talk about the positives, or what has kept you resilient during this period, because we are still going through that here. And what have you taken out of this experience that will leave you for the better as a human, or as a business operator? And May, would you like to kick off?
I think it's definitely hard because for us now, it's been a year and a half since we had protests and then COVID. I think it's really important for us. Like, I think for my age, I'm 36. So I think the economy has been in a boom for 15 years. So I've never really experienced as a professional what an economic downturn or what COVID means in terms of business. So this time around, I've become very resilient. Like, the first time I had to lay off like 50% of the people, I definitely cried and I was so upset about myself. And then the next time I was like, okay, the moment the next COVID hit, I was like, okay, guys, like, we need to talk about no pay leave. You become more resilient as a business owner. Like, things need to be done. So I think the positive is that we learn from this, and then these things might happen again. But when it happens again, it's not that it just comes back to business as usual. If it happens again 5 years from now, we know exactly what to do. And I think that's important, that we learn and not just think that we're just waiting it out. It's like you learn to become more resilient as a person. And so I think what's really cool too is the team that I've kept are really the best superstars that are loyal to our company, but also amazing people that are willing to kind of ride it out together. And so I believe that when you have that fundamental structure to grow again, I think it makes the company probably, or restaurants, better in the future. So that's something that I think people should take positively as a learning experience.
Yeah, and I think we were chatting earlier, and you said it's brought you closer to the business. The business was doing very well before the protests and COVID, and you feel like you're a better business operator now because you understand the business in more detail.
In 2013, when I opened my restaurant, it's 300 square feet, 20 seats. I sat 120 people for dinner service. I did 6 rounds. Nobody could need to tell me about labor costs, food costs, whatever. I was like, I'm doing so well. And now it's like every 2 weeks, I'm like, every week we're like, can we save 2 hours?
Yeah.
Or like, how can we bring this down to 2%? Like, what kind of chef I used to just think about how creative I was or how cool I was or whatever. And now it's like, we're looking at numbers really closely, and I've become really creative with numbers and hours and scheduling. Like my manager used to tell me about 9-hour shifts. I was like, let's make it 8.5 hours if we need to be. Don't tell me 9 hours and just auto mode it. I'm like 9, 6, 5, 4, whatever is needed as is. Yeah. Not just like tell me that everyone wants to work 9. Like, it's not a possibility. So we all had these reality checks about our lives. And then
right. That's your learning.
At the end, balance of creativity and passion for the business. Yeah. But at the end of the day, it's a business. Yeah.
Okay, wonderful. And Josh, a man of many experiences, and I should say also a Melburnian for a brief amount of time when you had May's restaurant down here. I forgot to mention that earlier.
Totally, I spent 4 years down in Melbourne in total.
Yeah, absolutely. What can you share with us about what you've learned about yourself personally and the business of running a restaurant during a pandemic?
Oh, I mean, restaurateurs, or most of us, are resilient. I think we go through. It's a passion project. It's a job we love. You get huge job satisfaction, and you have to get through the highs and lows of running restaurants. I think through this, I've been pretty impressed with how our staff have handled it and the understanding I've had from various staff. I have possibly had one of the busiest years I've had in the last 10, 15 years, just because it's a head back down, head down and figure this all out. And I know as a person, I really like working in my businesses. You try and structure your businesses so that you don't get tied down and that you can work on your businesses. But I love being in my businesses, and I think that's one of the things I'm a far happier person when I'm in there, and I enjoy it a lot more. So I think that has been part of this process of that year is exactly what made you're back in there, and you're back in the grind, and to be honest, that's why we all got it in the first place. It's a knife in hand and that sort of thing, which I really enjoy. But you do have to really focus on being able to you know, make it work, and actually be able to make some money.
Wow.
You know, because there's nothing without making money. There's no point being in it. So, you know, I think there's positives to take out of the year. You know, there has to be, right? You don't. What else is there? You know, we've had lockdowns. I've had a 7-week lockdown with my family, and I've tried to enjoy it, and you know, not drink cocktails every night, because we sort of, what else do you do when you can't leave the house? You know, and plan for the future. But I think it's important that people recognize what, you know, the rest has done for the planet. You know, we all know what it looked like when the planet got switched off in that early lockdown, and pretty much the whole planet got locked down for 7 weeks. So I think it's important for people to look at that and try and figure out for the future, because we beat it up a little bit, don't we? And we need to stop doing that.
That's a great point to end on. Thank you, Josh. And Rob, you're we were chatting earlier, and you're in it for the long haul in New York, and you're sticking by New York and sticking by the restaurant. And I believe you just bought a new business today as well.
Yeah, I basically got to sell my liver. We bought a 100-year-old tavern, Jason and I, because we're idiots, and we just reinvested in the city.
There you go.
For our crew to go, you know, like, look, I'll answer the question differently about what positive comes out. I would say if I was, you know, a betting man, I would look back and say that we didn't need any positivity to come out of this. What we need is the real truth. And for people like Chris in Victoria, Victoria's got nothing positive coming out of this. They didn't need to do it. It didn't need to happen. It's kind of ridiculous. What actually has come out of this is mental trauma. And so I would look at it and go, a real truth has happened. People are starting to speak about it again. You know, everybody talks about hospitality, you know, mental trauma and are you okay and that whole movement, but there are plenty of industries where everybody works like 70, 80 hours a week. And so I actually, during our lockdown, and if anybody wants to write this down, I've got a book called The Surrender Experiment. It's by Michael A. Singer, and it's a book about not giving up, but it's also a book about knowing what you can control and you can't control, particularly through this process. I bought 42 copies and I sent them to friends all over the place. I couldn't buy any more. I tried to buy more, but there wasn't any left. I think everybody was at home reading. So I would answer it in this way. There's a real truth that's come out in the hospitality industry. It's made people start to talk more about it and stop being heroes and everybody going, I'm tough and everybody's great and whatever. But I think the biggest thing that's come out of this is we need to really watch our young people, particularly in Victoria and in all the cities around the world that are in lockdown like New York, because there's a lot of people are sitting at home right now in a shitty little apartment, locked at home, no money coming in, can't pay the rent. So I don't want to end the whole thing on a down note, but I think we're not out of the woods yet. And, you know, hospitality people always put a brave face on. And I like to be the one person that doesn't pretend that everything's great. I'm a privileged white man in the world of America right now, which is basically like Looney Tunes when it comes to politics. But if you look at somewhere like Victoria, where you are right now, and I talk to the people there, and, you know, I think Chris is actually watching this. He's got two therapists running around seeing all his staff, right? So that stuff needs to come out. That's really important to me, because hospitality is always covered up with a macho respect for this stuff. So out of this, the good part is that we won't give up. The learning out of this is we didn't need to do this, right? It's unnecessary. It came because of stupid governance and because of people that are in charge it shouldn't. And I would say to all Australians, you've got a compulsory voting system there, and we've got more freedom here and we don't. And I kind of look at it and I go, make a change in government, make a change in the decision makers, because the hospitality industry will survive, but we're not supposed to. We're supposed to thrive. We're not supposed to just survive. We do that when we're 21 and we're trying to figure out how to pay the rent and get milk and eggs, you know? So I think on the flip side of this, I've done some good work personally myself, and been practiced at making money and losing it, and success and failure. And I know all that, what it looks like. And success is not having a great Instagram profile. Success is having great people around that are in good mental health, and then I can help them pay their rent.
And you talked about the fact that you're mentoring, I think, 3 young people. What is the message that you give them? What are the 3 sort of key messages that you give them to help them through this period?
2 of them are, one of them's here, one of them's in New York, and one of them's in Italy. And first thing is, I said during lockdown is, don't go to the beach like everybody else, hustle and learn a new craft. Because there's nothing more than, you know, I started as a pot washer and now I have a design firm and I work in all different fields, creative director and whatever. It didn't fall in my lap. I left school at 14. And I'm not trying to have a hard life, you know, moment and everybody feel for me and all that kind of stuff. While everybody was saying, why don't you go and have a break? And why don't you do 3 months and this and that? I was like, sure, if this is the time you want to learn how to play the guitar or, you know, the flute or whatever you wanted to learn, go do it. But to the mentorees that I was speaking to, I got them to go hustle. I go learn another craft, figure out how you're going to finance your way out of this, get your balance sheet to look right, and then learn something else in hospitality that you don't know. It might be something you hate doing. So I'm a stone and shoe kind of guy. Gandolfini, the actor from The Sopranos, used to be renowned for talking about that. But I'm a stone and a shoe guy. I do things I don't like doing. Like I take ice baths twice a week and cold showers every morning, and I hate doing it. I've never liked doing it, but it's really good for me. And so in hospitality, it's things I hate doing. And Jason and I swapped roles. And he was actually at home cooking, and he was doing testing a few dishes. I was horrified to think Jason was cooking, but he's really great behind the bar. And he was making me do admin, and I absolutely hate admin. I couldn't think of anything more irritating than a spreadsheet. But I would say to hospitality people right now, you know, you've got the internet. This isn't the 60s. Imagine if they didn't have that right now, particularly in Victoria. Learn a new craft, learn a new skill, right? And don't give up. And even, you know, maybe it's not even in the same genre. Maybe it's not in hospitality. But coming out of this, you're going to have to know a lot more because, you know, we always have this thing when we're older in hospitality. Well, you know, worst case scenario, I'm in hospitality. There'll be thousands of roles because everywhere in the world, everybody has the same thing. You can't find enough staff, right? But right now, there's nowhere to work. So, you know, 50 million people globally, half of them are technically unemployed right now. And so what do? What if you've got one skill in one place? So my advice to my mentorees was that. And they've all done it. One of them's learned a language and has actually learned how to write in P&L for one of their restaurants. Another one's actually not in restaurants. She's in finance. So that's the advice I give to anyone. And don't, you know, it's easy to say don't give up, but I would talk to people that are battle hardened, not people that are shining, as Jason Scott would call them, the glowing Instagrammers that pretend every post is amazing and they're surfing and they're growing and they're doing all this. I talk to the people that are beaten up, a little bit like restaurateurs in Australia, the old boys like Chris that have done it. I keep bringing him up because, you know, he's fresh in my mind from this morning, but I interviewed 2 hospitality veterans, and I just want to sneak this in, from Sparks Steakhouse, a very infamous steakhouse in New York known for shooting Paul Castellano, the head of the Gambino family, at the front, and it actually has good steaks. And both boys had seen every pandemic possible. One of them was Australian, and one of them was actually a cameraman, and then he was a stuntman, and then he ended up working in a bar, and then he ended up doing accounting because he just figured that whatever's going to come his way, he'll figure it out. And I think that's an important lesson for hospitality people. Don't put all your eggs in one basket. It's old-fashioned, but it's true.
Yeah. Thank you. Well, thank you very much. It's a great note to end on. And Rob, good luck with your podcast. We'll keep our eyes peeled. When are you launching it?
Raw Hospitality Show, probably the next 2 weeks, the first interview will come out. We've got about 20 interviews across the world. We've got some pretty amazing heroes, but it's not about celebrityism. It's about people that work in famous places that are the real grassroots humans that are actually, for me, the heroes, right? Yeah. The people that you go back for. So thanks for mentioning it.
No, not at all. And Josh, good luck tonight and in the coming weeks. We can't wait to come and visit when we come to Auckland.
Thank you very much. We're getting on with it and excited.
Yeah, great. And May, good luck with opening Happy Paradise. You're hoping to open it by the end of the month, I believe.
Yes, we're reopening. Yes.
So reopening Happy Paradise. Well, thank you all for joining us today. You're incredibly busy people, and we really appreciate you spending the time with us. I'm sure the audience would have taken so much value out of our conversation. So thank you very much. On behalf of the Melbourne Food and Wine Festival, thank you everyone for tuning in. Another thank you to our friends at the Bank of Melbourne and Visit Victoria for your ongoing support so we can create these forums and have these wonderful conversations. Thank you all very much. Good night to you, Rob. Good afternoon to you, May and Josh. And thank you for joining us.
Bye, guys.
Bye. Thank you.